Up next, we're going to hear about 3 first-party data predictions you won't want to ignore from Zack Wenthe, CDP Evangelist, Treasure Data. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for coming on the last day. I know after a couple days in Vail, everybody's at altitude, and so day 3 is kind of tough, but thank you for joining us. My name is Zack Wenthe. I am the CDP Evangelist for Treasure Data. We are an enterprise CDP. What that means is we're a customer data platform. We allow brands to bring all of their customer data across multiple systems that are often disconnected, bring it in, create that true customer profile, and take action on that. And as a result of that, my job is to go around and talk with our customers, with our prospects, with analysts, with industry experts, and I have the opportunity a lot of times to talk about what's next, where are things going. And so today I've got a couple minutes to talk to you about some 3 trends or 3 predictions in first-party data that I think everybody needs to pay attention to. Whether you're on the supply side, whether you're on the demand side, whether you are in growth for your own company or not, data is important, right? And your customers are thinking about it, you're thinking about it, and so let's talk about 3 things that I think are going to impact over the next year, and then I got a bonus one to finish things up. But first, I want to thank Steve for the Daily Show podcast that kept me awake last night while I was driving in from Denver, so that was timely. All right, number 1, cookies will still catch people off guard. We've been talking about the deprecation and death of third-party cookies for, it feels like 50 years now at this point. We're all sick and tired of it. And yet surveys repeatedly show 50 to 60% of companies still don't have a plan. They still don't exactly know what's going to happen. Now, part of that's understandable, right? We know that Google has changed their mind about 40 times about what's going to happen, what's going to be next. We know there's new ad tech coming. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is third-party cookies are gonna end. That's the reality. We know that there's going to be replacements, but the only way to be prepared for the replacement, the only way to think about this is to understand what is your first-party data strategy. How are you going to collect data so you are not dependent on others to provide access to that information? How many people here have a first-party data strategy that they feel confident with? And that's generally the response. It's like, yeah, we're thinking about it, we're still talking about it. So if nothing else, if you walk away from this conference and don't think about anything else, think about what happens if tomorrow the switch gets flipped off. Because at some point in time, and we'll talk about number 2, the trend that's also kind of piggybacking on this, that's going to happen. It's going to change how we think about ad spend. It's going to change how we think about attribution. It's going to think about how we work with an anonymous audience. And don't be one of those 50% that is caught off guard. And if you work with advertisers or if you work with businesses, make sure they're ready. This is an opportunity for brands who work with advertisers to be trusted advisors and be leaders, and don't let your customers get caught off guard. Because again, we know that they're thinking about it, we know that they're talking about it, but a lot of them are not taking action yet. All right. So that was the easy one. Number 2, and this is, if you paid attention to the congressional hearings on TikTok lately, this is not a surprise. But the triple down on privacy is only going to continue. So first we saw GDPR, then we saw CCPA. Every state in the nation currently has either a policy in committee or a law on the books around customer data, around privacy, around what you can and cannot do with data. But reality is now it's become political. It's become a political talk as we go into an election cycle. TikTok has become an enemy. We know politicians need enemies. That's how it works. So whether or not you believe that the privacy of the world is at stake by us scrolling short-form video or not is irrelevant. Know that customer data and your privacy is going to be challenged. How you use it, how you collect it, what you do with it. If you do not have a organizational data dictionary on first-party data. What you collect, where you collect it, how you collect it, and what you use it for, you are behind. And I'm not saying that to be all doom and gloom. The reality is you need to have this information because at some point in time, we saw this with, how many people lived through kind of the web world with like accessibility, where all of a sudden there were a bunch of lawyers that came out of the woodwork and started suing people, right? It became a trend. It's like, well, if you're not accessible, there's lawsuits. The same thing is going to happen with first-party data. There's money there. And we know it's a hot topic, and it's an emotional issue. So the reality is if you're not tripling down on privacy, good governance, good planning, those are kind of table stakes. We understand that. But talking about it, being transparent with your internal stakeholders of why do we need this data? What are we going to use this data for? Working with your brands, as publishers working with your brands, what are you collecting data for? How are you doing? Because by proxy, a lot of times there's going to be this, well, you help supply data to said third-party company. You're complicit in the action. So again, thinking about what is that. So my number one recommendation is have a data dictionary. Know all of your systems, know all of the data that is being collected, what it's being collected, where it's being stored, and how it's being used. And then audit it. Do we need to collect this? Do we need to know this information? If we haven't used it in 2 or 3 years, but we're collecting it in a survey somewhere, do we still need it? Because there's a risk. There's a risk in having that information. Also, starting to look at what we call innocent data sources. So an innocent data source is something that you believe doesn't have any identifiers in it, has no first-party data. But yet buried in some field 3 levels deep is a advertiser ID, or is a address, or is a phone number, or something that is hidden in the data. So it's not typically thought of as a first-party data source, but yet there's an identifier in there. Those are ones that are going to catch companies off guard, and those are the ones that when the lawyers come, or when the audits happen, that they're going to say, see, if that's a problem, what else is there? And then that gives proof for discovery. Now, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not trying to give legal advice here. It's a trend that is absolutely going to happen, and it's something we should all should be aware of. All right, and then the third trend, the third thing that you need to think about over the next year is context is king. As you think about understanding your customers, it's less about who they are demographically and more about what do they care about, what do they want to do, what are their motivations. If you spend any time online, if you've done any persona work, or if you've done anything else, you've seen the graphic of Prince Charles with Ozzy Osbourne, and it says, oh, well, they're both, this age range, they grew up in a castle, they live in England, but they're clearly, well, it's King Charles now, I guess. King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne are very different people. They have very different motivations. The context is different. So collecting demographic, collecting zero-party data is great as an identifier. But if you're not wrapping it with behavioral information, if you're not thinking about the context in which that customer is interacting with you, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And the reality is when we go away from anonymous identifiers, when we lose those third-party cookies, context is going to be a great way to serve ads. Context is going to be a great way to build lead generation or lead capture programs. Because if you know that somebody is a fan of Yellowstone, I'm just going to steal from them. If they're a fan of Yellowstone and they're on a Yellowstone landing page, let's serve them some lead gen with Yellowstone content to get them to, that's very generic and easy. But again, thinking about the context and the mode that they're in. So if you walk away and you think about this, a trick that I can give you is, what is the primary motivation of that individual in that experience? It's not to give you data. It's to be a better version of themselves. That's what they're doing on a website. That's what they're doing when they're reading content. There's a better version of themselves that they're searching for, whether that's happiness, whether that's to fix a problem, whatever. What is that context? Because that will be how you can drive advertising. That is how you're going to improve click-through rates. That is going to be how you're going to grow your audiences. So focusing on the context and the interactions that you are having is a complete area where I think we miss out a lot, right? I think we focus so much on what we want, we miss out on what the consumer wants. And again, if you work with brands, if you work with companies who are kind of struggling and want to know, this is an opportunity to, again, be a thought leader. Grow your sphere of influence by helping those who depend on you. All right, and then my last one, I'll call it a bonus. I said 3, and I always like to kind of over-deliver, is I would be remiss if I didn't talk about ChatGPT, because I think it's, required speaking now for anybody who speaks on stage to throw some chat. But actually, I'm going to talk about it differently. I don't think it's as revolutionary as everybody is kind of harping on. But there's something hidden in there. ChatGPT is interesting. But the reality is, for businesses, it's fun, it's a gimmick. The average consumer doesn't get a lot of value out of it, right? We like it right now because, we can type some fun stuff in and it gets some answers and it responds back, or it writes some, all my developer friends, it can fix my code, it can write some SQL, that's cool. The reality of what's the opportunity, though, is assistive AI. Having a system that can learn your preferences, that can learn your interests. And if you've seen, OpenAI just released a marketplace that allows plugins. So now if they can also feed in shopping data, content from third-party sources that AI can process and now do things like plan travel, book a trip, come up with recommendations for restaurants based on your dietary restrictions. Things that Siri and Alexa and things we've talked about for a long time with kind of that conversational AI, but the assistive AI is going to be able to not only do that, but do it in context, do it personalized to you, and do it at a scale that the conversational kind of chat solutions have not been able to do yet to date. So if you think of the framework of Alexa, and you add a skill to Alexa, and now she can tell you, what time the March Madness games are. That's great. But now tie that into all of your content as a publisher. If all of that content can be fed in, and that assistive AI then can recommend what shows to watch, what podcasts to listen to, right? You like this, so you should listen to this. And then you feed information back, and it learns. That is going to be what consumers will get behind. And it's a huge opportunity as a publisher, as a content, to start thinking about how do we tap into those skills? How do we tap into those plugins to feed into those large language models? Now, I will preface this with one thing. This is not the next year. Assistive AI at scale, at value, is probably 18 months to 24 months. But the speed of innovation that just even OpenAI has gone on, and this is not a commercial for them, because there's 200 plus, I think I saw in my feed yesterday, there was 200 plus AI tools released in the last week. Now, a lot of them are probably junk, or they're gimmicky, or they're just a rehashing of the ChatGPT, either 3.5 or 4 model, and that's okay. The point is this is the first time an entire kind of business group outside of industry verticals have really gotten excited about something in a long time. So that's something we don't want to ignore. The excitement behind the potential has opened up a lot of new innovation, new ideas, new excitement that we have not seen in years, 3, 4, 5 years, right? So don't rush into AI, that's my recommendation yet, but pay attention to it. There are opportunities, and those who support it, those who don't just say this is a gimmick, those who don't just say this is going to, it'll go by the wayside. Remember when people said the internet was going to go by the wayside? It's just a thing. AI is going to be the same reality. So this is an opportunity. There's a lot of money at stake. So again, as a trusted advisor, share that with your crowd, share that with your brands. And I want to thank everybody for sticking around. I only had 15 minutes to talk. I'm happy to continue this conversation with anybody. If anybody would like to connect, I am on LinkedIn. Feel free to that'll take you right to my LinkedIn, and we can carry this conversation on. If you have any questions about what I said today. But thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day in Vail, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you.